Skills have
They said they're ready.
The time is 5:03 p.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome those who are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those watching the meeting via live streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board to, well, we're not doing that tonight, right? Oh, okay. Addressing the board, would please use the microphone at the podium and identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event there's a disruption in the streaming, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We'll move to item B on the agenda, it's a Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll have Los Lunas Middle School Principal Matt Pendrak will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Chavez, will you please announce the meeting?
This meeting has been announced in accordance with the New Mexico Open Meetings Act and the Los Lunas Schools Open Meetings Resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education.
Ms. Chavez, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Board President Otero, there are no changes or deletions to the agenda this evening.
Okay, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. I'd stand for a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. President,
Dr. Osowski.
I move to approve the agenda as presented by Mrs. Chavez.
We have a motion by Dr. Osowski to approve the agenda as presented by Superintendent Chavez. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Mrs. Dana Sanders. Ms. Sanders, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Seymour, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Osowski, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The agenda is approved by a vote of 5-0. Okay, we're moving to item E on the agenda, and that's presentation and acceptance of the special audit. Tonight we have some special guests here tonight. So we have our New Mexico State Auditor, Joseph Maestas. Along with Mr. Maestas, we have the Special Investigations Director, Mr. Sean Beck. We also have Audrey Jaramillo with Jaramillo Accounting Group, and she is accompanied by Justin Maynard. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Maestas. If you would please step to the podium, and thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, district staff. It's an honor to be here. My name's Joseph Maestas. I'm your New Mexico State Auditor. And I do want to recognize another member of my staff. He always likes to kind of like hang out in the back for some reason, but he's right over there. David Pena, where are you? Oh, he's right over here. You were back there. He is my Policy Director and Public Information Officer. And of course, everyone knows Sean Beck.
Yes.
Before I begin my remarks, and they're going to be very brief, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I am a proud product of our public school system, and there's more. My dad was a teacher. He was a 7th grade science teacher when I was in junior high, and I was one of his students. And he had this policy where he would arrange the desks, and they were assigned, right, for the whole semester based on the first letter of the last name. And so I decided to go in early. And of course, I couldn't address him as dad. I'd say, Mr. Maestas, where's my desk? And can anyone guess where my desk was? Right in the front. So I'm still getting over that trauma, but I can tell you this, though, having an educator in the family created such an awareness and focus on academics, and I think, and a work ethic. And so I carry that with me, you know, throughout my adult life. I also had a sister who was a public school teacher. And this is in the Espanola district. She was a special education teacher, and they both spent their entire careers in the public education system. And so I know how important that this is to our kids. And I know you school board members, this is essentially a volunteer position. I'm not sure if you're paid. I don't think you are. Most school board members are not. But you do this out of the goodness and concern for your community and the kids in your community. And so I commend you for that. I spent decisions that may not have followed the proper public process. Other issues identified in the audit included an extended period of noncompliance with licensure requirements by school personnel, irregularities in approved leave and work time, resulting in potential overpayment to employees, and a lack of formal internal audit function within the district. While the district maintains strong, and I want to emphasize strong, underlying financial systems and generally effective internal controls in many operational areas, the audit identified meaningful deficiencies in governance, compliance application, and leadership alignment. The audit also identified areas for improvement, particularly in contracting practices, clarity of roles, and adherence to transparency requirements. At its core, this audit is about one thing: public trust. When parents send their children to school, they trust the system is working in their best interests. When taxpayers fund our schools, they trust that every dollar is spent responsibly and legally. That trust must be protected. And I know that when all of you took the oath of office, because I've taken the oath of office 7 times, there's nothing in there about public trust. There's nothing in there about upholding fiduciary responsibility. So that oath is chock full of a lot of responsibilities that you have, and I can't emphasize that enough. But families don't get a second chance at their child's education. That's why accountability here matters so much. Let me be also clear about what this audit does and does not do. This audit does not determine criminal wrongdoing. It examines systems, processes, and compliance with the law. When systems are not clear or not consistently followed, even routine decisions can create risk and erode public confidence. This audit, however, provides a path forward. Follow procurement rules every time. Clearly define roles between the board and administration. Ensure decisions are made in the open as required by law, and strengthen oversight and internal controls. My office expects full cooperation and follow-through from district leadership. This is your opportunity to demonstrate accountability, strengthen the school system going forward, and rebuild trust within your community. As I said before, remember, families don't get a second chance at their child's education. That's why accountability here matters so much. Our office will continue to protect tax dollars, promote transparency, and ensure public institutions serve the public with integrity. Thank you for your time, and I want to call up Audrey Jaramillo with Jaramillo Accounting Group. She'll be presenting the audit, and then her and I will stand for any questions, I guess, from the school board, Mr. Chair?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you again for your time, folks. Audrey?
Thank you, Auditor Maestas. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, superintendent, and everyone here. It's a full house, which is good to see. Participation is great. So we are, as the auditor mentioned, to go over the results as required in public of the special audit consulting report, and we'll be showing it up on the screen here. And the period of the engagement was July 1st, 2023 to May 1st, 2025. Okay, so I think in order to read that, we may have to zoom. There we go. So, yeah, that's great, that's great. And is it gonna, okay, perfect. Okay, that's fine, that's fine. All right, so,
Ms. Jaramillo,
yes, sir.
I just want to point one thing out. For those that are here and don't have a copy, this is posted on State Auditor website. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
So anyone here or anyone watching via Zoom, yeah, you'll be able to obtain this copy from State Auditor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good point. And on the main landing page of the State Auditor's Office website, there's a green button that says Audit Report Search, I think it is. You click on that and then can type in Los Unison, or any governmental entity that you're curious about, right? That has all of the government's reports throughout the state there, and it goes many years back as well, so it's a great source of information. So here's our table of contents. Let's run through this real quick. We won't go through every single page, otherwise we would be here for hours upon hours. So we'll keep it brief. There is a lot of reading. We have been through this in the exit conference already with the board and administration and the audit committee as well. The executive summary is first, and then a short paragraph on our special audit procedures. We repeat the scope of work that's the original genesis of the engagement, some comments on findings and definitions and perceptions, and then we dive into the areas of risk tested, and you can see them A through E there. Board of Education procurements testing, which was mainly in regards to legal services. Other procurements were tested. Board involvement in day-to-day operations, which was the original concern, or one of the original concerns, and time and leave testing, and other miscellaneous items addressed. The district did have corrective actions already between the time of the scope of this audit and 25 to date, and so those are listed there, and then a conclusion. We also have the exit conference that's required to be disclosed, and then Exhibit 1 we will go through together. That's the schedule of findings and responses, and then the anonymous employee survey analysis. And we did try to keep those comments and that data anonymous so as they couldn't be identified to any particular person, and that's in Exhibit 2. So this is the report. It starts off just with some standard language talking about the scope of the audit. We did perform the audit in conjunction with AICPA Consulting Services and Standards, and of course under the State Audit Act and the audit rule, which is referenced there. The district, of course, as with any audit, remains responsible for their own accounting records, internal controls and compliance, prevention of fraud, etc. So this originally began with a letter of concern from PED. Concerns appeared to be with procurement and board members possibly overstepping their role. And I think everyone here is aware, just given what the district has been through in the past with the suspension of the Board of Finance and everything that happened here, that there are sensitivities, I would say, to that pattern of behavior being repeated. And so I think it's a good thing that was looked at, and at the end of the day, we do not have significant concerns about board members overstepping their roles. There are a lot of technical things that we will go through that have happened with procurement, but it mainly related to one engagement or a couple engagements for legal services. And we have some recommendations lined out in the findings. So that's the first bullet there. Basically, the board temporary superintendent, procurement, and finance did not intentionally overstep their roles. Overstepping roles by board members and superintendents was limited to a few instances, which related to incomplete or inaccurate advice that those individuals had received. We did note that the roles and duties of Board of Education members are significantly misunderstood in the district. I would say on that note that board members do have the duty to do many of the things that were being challenged that they not do. And so board members definitely need to be in contact with the community. They definitely need to have a voice. They definitely need to have an oversight role. They definitely need to be speaking to the superintendent about concerns that they have, whether it's with personnel or other matters. And what they can't do, of course, is actually go and direct the staff. That's the superintendent's job, you all know that. But using their role of oversight and being the closest to the people, it is their duty to bring up issues that they see and that they understand from the community that could be a problem to the superintendent. And then everything that the superintendent does is delegated from the board. So the board is in essence the executive leadership of the district, but all of that gets delegated to the superintendent. And so the roles here in a lot of ways were a little confused. I would say also that there are many aspects to any given situation. So any contract that you're going to enter into or anything that the board is going to consider, there's many different chains of compliance. And so procurement will just be one piece of the chain, if you imagine like a chain link. And then there will be legal things that are another piece in puzzle. And then you will have board policy, for example, that is another part of it, and many different policies that maybe they all have to work together. So compliance for governments is getting to be a lot of red tape, and it is very difficult for any one given department or one person to know every single requirement. And I think that in some cases, the knowledge maybe just wasn't there, or the advice was given possibly for circumstances that were in the past or something like that. So compliance can be very tricky and very difficult for governments, and that's really what we saw here, was some incomplete information and advice in certain situations. There were $64,500 in stipends overpaid to an employee who did not have qualifying licensure, so we did note that. We did identify time and leave exceptions in 3 of the 4 employees tested. We saw that the district did have, that's okay, I'm making sure I got that last bullet point at the top there. Okay, time and leave, yeah, that was the 3 of 4 employees was identified for 2 employees when possible exceptions for 1 employee could not be quantified. And that's detailed out a little further in the report and in the finding. So certain procurement policies and also a highly relevant New Mexico Ethics Commission advisory opinion were not properly understood or communicated and implemented in conjunction with each other. So this relates to the one procurement for legal services that was in dispute, and that there were no other purchases on behalf of the Board of Education identified in our testing. So what this means is in our scope of work, we were asked to look at, was the board directing any other procurements or anything like that? And we did not see anything else on behalf of the Board of Education in our testing. And we did test a lot of procurement. And there's charts in the report that detail those out. And it is reasonable, of course, for the Board of Education to be able to hire legal counsel. And the Ethics Commission advisory opinion was very clear about that from a few years back, that this district and others, it would apply to others as well, even if you've already gone out to bid, you can just as well hire another attorney. It's fine, as long as you're following all of the procurement and board policies. And in this case, it was very messy. Like I said, some parts missing from the advice and the facts that people had. But it didn't go through the procurement office the way that it should have. And there was miscommunication between, I think, the superintendent's office, the legal, and the Board of Education. And so I guess you could call it a perfect storm. I don't know how to describe it exactly, other than different people had different parts of the information, and the process did not go smoothly. But at the end of the day, was it illegal to hire an additional attorney? No, that's perfectly acceptable. Just like if you were to hire an additional contractor, for example, you can do that. You just have to make sure that the rules are followed. Okay, we identified many policy recommendations for the Audit Committee and Board of Education and the Superintendent to consider. And so there's a finding with many bullet points that we have recommendations on. The district generally has very strong and effective internal controls, and that's including but not limited to purchasing, disbursements, and record keeping. The district staff here in finance is very, very conscientious. They're a good team. They have low turnover. And what we've seen over the years, they've always been responsive. They've always provided what we've asked for. And the number of exceptions in our extensive testing, oh, God bless you. The number of what we call exceptions, or differences in our very large samples that we did, were so small, and there's charts in there, which means, anytime you take a deep dive into testing, like in a special audit that's very detailed, there are going to be exceptions. Everyone is human, right? But the level of exceptions was extremely low here, and that just confirms what we already knew as your audit firm that the district has very strong internal controls and conscientious employees in finance. So we performed the statistical sampling as shown. We did note that there was a policy that procurements be brought to the Board of Education, and they weren't always brought to the Board of Education because the district had just changed policy services, but there was a procedure manual that still required that. And so since it was still required, we had to write it up as an exception because it's still, that procedure still existed. We did not identify any inappropriate vendor relationships at all. We did see that one investigator for the district was a former superintendent who had left the district approximately 4 years prior to the work. There are reports of investigations of wrongdoing by previous board members that are still not resolved through due process, and these need to be followed through on with continued oversight in order for the district to move on with truth and healing. And so a lot of times with these special audits, I think the best thing is just sometimes, as hard as it is, opened up the wound and, you know, kind of clean things out, look at what we're dealing with, look what happened, what didn't happen, look at the truth of the matter. And then people can take corrective actions, learn from mistakes because no one is perfect. But in this area, there's definitely an area outstanding that there are allegations against former board members that really, that has not been determined. And so we are really encouraging oversight agencies, and I understand that, that some information has been turned in as well, that needs to be monitored in the future, and the truth needs to be known so the district can move on and heal once everything is known and resolved. The survey that we took, and thank you all for those of you who did participate, there was a really high response rate on that, which was great. It wasn't everyone, but it was still good to hear from you all. The concerns there related to some lack of accountability, time and leave concerns, you know, just keeping in mind, like the auditor said, these are taxpayer dollars. You know, leave fraud or time fraud is with taxpayer funds, it has to be accounted for. Special education was a concern, and inclusion. There were some reports of nepotism or special treatment for friends, and also, as everyone has, communication issues. So if you think you're communicating enough, you probably really aren't, right? That goes for all of us. So, but the survey generally indicated that most of the scope of the work of the audit really related to those within central office. It wasn't too much out at the individual campus sites. Okay. So I'm going to skip through scope of work because we've already talked about that, and that's in the contract. We've referred to the findings here. We do highly recommend implementing a strong politically and operationally independent internal audit function, reporting directly to the Board of Education, of course, through the audit committee and the superintendent. That could be contracted out or an employee, but is something that they more than pay for themselves. Internal auditors do. Statistically, they can identify fraud, waste, and abuse. They're number 2 on the list. And put to rest any rumors or anything that may be, you know, kind of swirling around in the background. So internal audit is, although not common, doesn't mean it shouldn't be, right? And so anytime a district has had issues, it's one of our number 1 recommendations. We do state here and have a disclaimer that we do not conclude on the guilt or innocence of any party. And so from here, any potential violations or criminal or civil matters will be referred by the state auditor's office to the appropriate agencies. And so that is not our role. We are just here to look at the facts and objectively report what we see without taking sides. We don't know your local politics and That's not what factors into this. What we are here is to independently look at things and ask the questions and get as many facts as we here. There's a section on perceptions, and I think it's important to note for anyone really, when you're in these types of situations, that public perception or individual perception or departmental perception, whatever it is, can really impact a situation in a perfect storm, right? Past experiences, institutional history, if there's been disputes, disgruntled employees, you know, any controversies, anything can kind of color the lens through which everything is looked at. And so we try our best to not let those things impact us, because we're not in your community, first of all, and like I said, don't know the politics, but we're here just to look at the facts. But those of you who are here, those perceptions are going to impact the way that you see things. But at the end of the day, the truth still needs to be known, and corrective actions can be taken wherever possible. So this next area of the report goes through the risks that were tested, and it goes in accordance with the scope of work. It's very long. I'm not going to go through all of this. We'll probably jump here pretty shortly to the findings. But it does have a narrative and a lot of detail on what we tested and what we concluded. And tells a little bit more of the story than the findings, because the findings in Exhibit 1 are really related to what were the violations. And so this narrative in the report just gives a little more detail, whereas the findings focus on the violations or recommendations that we had. We are required under the state audit rule to report and the Audit Act to report anything, even as much as just a good accounting practice. So it's a pretty low bar for what all we need to add. So we go through, you know, how the legal services were obtained and the different attorneys that were procured by the district. Sometimes, you know, you have attorneys that will leave a firm and start a new firm, and then that comes with, you know, okay, what do we do for contracts? What do we do for procurement? Those types of questions. We did identify in our procedures that there was a board policy, I think it's 1250, that the Board of Education does have to approve the law firms that are serving the district. Now, they do default to serving the Board of Education. If there is ever a conflict between administration and the board, they default to that. But attorneys in their own have ethical standards on conflicts of interest, which, you know, others may not have, you know, it's one of those chain links, right? Others may not have realized. And so if an attorney is too close to somebody and has been advocating for someone, such as the superintendent, they can't then go and represent somebody in like adverse interests, is what I'm saying, conflicts of interest. And so that was another consideration in the legal services procurement of vendors for legal services. I think everyone here in administration is probably aware there was Open Meeting Act violation, and the school board, I think, addressed that openly, transparently, read the whole story, corrected it, cured it, they call it. And so the only other Open Meetings Act violation that we noted just during our review was one meeting where a board member attended from another country and could not always be heard. And the requirement is that the board members everyone can hear each other. So the public has to be able to hear the board member has to be able to hear the public and each other as well, so. Okay, this shows some of our sampling, these tables here. And you can see there was a very low percentage of exceptions. We tested thousands and thousands of documents. Here's another chart. You can see on the second one there, sample items 2,471. And so a total of 14,826 with only one exception. So imagine, I'm not really sure I could find another district with only one exception out of 14,000. So it was really, really good results in our procurement testing. So a lot of the core of this engagement too, as was mentioned already, was relating to board member roles and duties. And we found that there was really a gross misunderstanding of the board members' roles and duties. And so we put into the report here kind of a Q&A format so that we could clearly state, like, here's what might be thought as a violation and then what is it. And so we have this general section here. Did the Board of Education or board members violate law, regulation, or policy or overstep in these instances? And I would add too that sometimes it's not just overstepping. I mean, there's malfeasance, but there's misfeasance too, or lack of doing your role as a board member. So let's not forget, Western New Mexico University, for example, is very public. The regents were asked basically to resign by the governor. And in a lot of sense, I think that was due to the impression that they weren't doing enough to oversee what the president was doing. And they weren't doing enough in the day-to-day operations. And they weren't doing their fiduciary duty in monitoring a lot of these things, such as the travel and all of that. So it is a very fine balance for board members. I mean, board members get told, oh, you can't do anything, but then on the other hand, they're told you didn't do enough. And so it's really, really hard to find that balance. But what I do know is if they become aware of things from the public, they have to speak up because it is a legal risk and an operational risk for them not to. But again, finding that balance where they're not going too far, but they can't be apathetic either. They can't just be rubber stamping. It has to be a balance. So, was discussing a vendor and tool for teachers and students in an open meeting when the member had previously worked for that company. Was that a violation? And we say no, and we refer to the related party transaction section below where it has a little bit more detail. But we did not see a conflict of interest or personal gain to our knowledge or from our interviews and testing. Any board member may share information and draw upon their work experience and knowledge to help the district operationally, financially, or otherwise. Now, if they are going to have a true conflict or benefit in some way themselves or their family, absolutely, they need to recuse themselves, they need to not participate, and that's a Governmental Conduct Act requirement. This next one, collecting and providing an attorney's business card to board members, and this was not a violation. So gathering and providing information is not prohibited by OMA, Open Meetings Act. But if you take it a step further, which is discussed in the next question, then it can be a violation, especially if you have what's called a rolling quorum. And so in this instance, in number 3, and you can scroll, thank you, a little bit, the board members did violate OMA on this subject because they discussed it, one group of board members discussed it on the way to a meeting, regional meeting, I think it was. And then also some different board members discussed at a conference and thereafter. So that's the rolling quorum that board members have to be careful. And this is very, very common. This is not unusual to Los Lunas. It is very, very hard to prevent rolling quorums, but having been in their position, I know you just have to be really conscientious and say, okay, if I'm gonna talk to, I have to pick only one other board member to talk to about a certain subject, and then that board member can't go and talk to a third or a fourth, right? That's the rolling quorum of conducting business outside of a meeting. And in reality, they can't do that. It has to all be transparently out here, posted on the agenda, et cetera. And so the next one is being a member of social media groups. You all have the Facebook group, commenting or answering community members on there. And we say no, board members are elected by the people and serve the public directly. And within their role, they are allowed and even expected to talk to community members, students, staff, vendors, oversight agencies, legislators, et cetera, in the course of their official duties. And so in order to properly perform their role, they need to be able to do this. And most communications with community members and staff are informal, not official statements. Now, remember I said everything is in balance. So if they are putting themselves out there as if they're speaking for the board, no, they can't do that. As if they're making a decision for the entire board, no, they can't do that. There's a question down below where that's going to come up, that that's not allowed. If they are gathering information, that's fine, and then providing to the superintendent, that's fine. And for by board policy, any official complaints needs to be routed through the superintendent, okay? And so I think that, most board members try to do that, have people follow the chain of command. But as you know, sometimes people are like, no, I don't want retaliation. I don't want you to even say my name. I don't want, they don't want to make an official report. So it's hard on board members because then they're hearing these things and they have a duty and a responsibility to address them, but they can't always have official statements through the superintendent. So again, it's a balancing act. They may not disclose legal or personnel matters. If anyone was seeing on social media that a board member was disclosing something confidential related to legal matters or personnel matters, that would be a big concern that should be addressed. We did not see that. Board members bring official complaints to the superintendent. And you can keep going down, thank you. So the next question, emailing constituents alleged comments such as we will address that or we can and will do better. We did not see that as crossing the line. We're not provided any examples of crossing the line, but I think that, again, routing things to the superintendent is a good idea. Reassuring constituents that matters will be addressed is also good. I can't tell you in how many communities board members don't even answer constituents. I mean, so that's on the other side of it. That's not right either. So trying to reassure people that things will be addressed, I think, is a good thing, and at least communicating with them. Addressing the issue of a newly elected board member not residing in the district she was elected to a meeting with legal counsel and meeting with the board member herself. And that was not a violation of the role. In fact, the board president is delegated by the Board of Education by policy to be the legal liaison for the board. And the superintendent at the time was reportedly informed twice of the issue and did not act. And it's not a violation of the president to seek legal counsel on any district topic. In fact, it was her duty. Any board member may meet with another board member to address the issue as long as there's not a rolling quorum. And as the chosen leader of the board, it would be neglecting his or her duties to the board to leave a critical board matter such as that unaddressed for the community. Again, you all represent the community. You are responsible to the community, to those who have elected you. And if there's something wrong, you have to address it. And sometimes I've seen where you try to bring things to the superintendent and it doesn't get addressed. That doesn't relieve you of the responsibility, so somebody has to act. Somebody has to bring that forward and have those tough conversations. Have your closed sessions as you need to and things like that. So making sure that things don't just get put to the side is important. And in this case, that situation was addressed and handled. utilizing law firm one's services on June 4th without an official board vote. And yes, this was a violation of policy. Now, this wasn't advised to the president at the time, but the procedures discovered that this was the policy because this was a violation because the Board of Education is to hire the school attorneys and to contract with the school attorneys. And then the next question there, requesting procurement of an additional attorney for board legal services, even though an RFP was completed the year before. And we say, no, we agree with another investigator that looked at this. And definitely that was, and I addressed that a little bit earlier in our conversation here tonight, that is within their rights to do. The board can hire another attorney. And if you want to scroll down, so that goes back to that Ethics Commission advisory opinion, and then sending letters of complaints to current law firms regarding their services. While may be recommended or ultimately deemed necessary, it's an ancillary issue to that issue they were considering is not required. And cancellation of current law firm's contract in order to procure another vendor is not required nor recommended. Alternative attorneys were either conflicted, unavailable, or unknown to the people involved in this decision. And the then president was receiving advice from multiple sources to retain this particular attorney. So again, back to, the situation, kind of a perfect storm here. Working with the superintendents to enter into a professional services agreement with law firm one, first no, then yes. This was a hard one to answer. But originally, this was fine to work with the superintendents, but then the superintendents were utilized prior to procurement and a board vote, which was the issue. So then there wasn't the purchase order that validly applied to this situation because it was new work with the attorney. And that law firm had already lost the RFP from the past. And so the purchase order that was in place was for continuing work on past cases. So when an attorney follows a case, then that procurement, that purchase order was for those past cases. And the attorney was specifically told by procurement not to pick up, that law firm was told not to pick up any new projects because they had lost the bid, right? Now, the attorney that was involved here may not have been aware of that. She wasn't on the email that said that. So then it's, again, it's pieces to the puzzle that maybe not everyone had, and advice that they were getting that may have been incomplete. Okay, so let me go forward here just a little and see, we talk about the ethics, the board president being the legal liaison. Number 10, obtaining legal advice that was not provided to the full board. No, per policy 1250, again, the president of the board shall have access to the board's attorneys and may request legal advice about school business. Such requests may be in writing, in person, or by telephone. The advice received shall be shared with the board and superintendent as determined by legal counsel. So that is a recommendation that we have in the findings to consider changing that, because right now it's leaving it up to legal counsel to share that information or not. And in my opinion, all board members should be apprised of things happening of a significant nature with risks and legal cases, personnel, things like that. Can you go back up just one little bit on that paragraph there? While the policy does not state this, board members should be able to request a written legal opinion letter through the board president. And if the president were to refuse for some reason, which is not the case here, but I'm just adding here the recommendation, they should be able to add an agenda item so the board could vote on receiving that legal opinion if they wanted it, at which point the president would be obligated to request it and provide it in accordance with the board policy. So the last, I think this might be the last one here. Oh no, there's a couple more. Changing board policy 2150 and comments regarding public participation in the September 16, 2025 board meeting. And no, from our review, the president, the chair, did not change the policy, but did add information that was provided by legal counsel to the policy information. There is no policy to not hear comments that include district employees by name. The public has First Amendment rights, of course, and to express their grievances to their governments, and the board has the duty to hear those complaints, even about personnel. The HB 212 that you all hear referred to frequently does not mean that the board cannot hear complaints, and they need to, in fact, perform their governance and oversight roles and address or discuss personnel, administrative, and day-to-day matters with the superintendent. Of course, the board cannot act directly on personnel, but certainly can receive complaints and concerns and can direct the superintendent at a policy level and oversight level, and then hold the superintendent accountable for anything that's happening on policy concerns. And they would be, in fact, negligent in their duties if they did not. And there are unfortunately examples of damage when board members have not communicated properly to the superintendent, and then hold the superintendent accountable for follow-up actions in the best interest of students, staff, and the public in general. Now, with all that being said, there's quasi-judicial powers that the Board of Education has. And so, excuse me, if there is a termination or an appeal of a personnel decision, the board members cannot have what's called ex parte communication about that particular case. Okay, so if there was, for example, that night going to be an appeal on a personnel decision and people wanted to come up and start testifying about it, the board would not be able to hear those, or shouldn't hear those matters, or have conversations with conflicted parties about those. But that's a totally different situation than just hearing feedback from the county. And of course, again, referring complaints to the superintendent. Okay, number 12, expressing opinions to the superintendent on an administrator or other personnel. We agree with Investigator 3 and his or her report, and the communications in question were not direction to staff. And we felt like an experienced superintendent would understand that one board member cannot take action, but has the right and duty to express their concerns. We noted unprofessional actions by that superintendent in sharing the board president's communications with the administration, causing a lawsuit. That's not what we typically see. There's some level of confidence between the superintendent and board members. Our procedures did indicate that the concerns expressed, while they were emotional and the board president may have waited until she were calmer, were valid concerns. Board members would not be performing their duty to the people in the district if they did not express concerns such as this to the superintendent. And then number 13, requesting that curriculum decisions be brought to the Board of Education on the agenda for consideration and action. It's not just, again, not just procurement. Procurement is one chain in the link of compliance. But really the bigger picture is that the board is responsible by state and regulation, state law and regulation, for determining educational policies of the district. Overstepping their role regarding board agendas. We did not see any instances of this occurring, but we do note, just for the future, that board presidents do have the duty to add the agendas items requested by individual board members timely and accurately, so as not to prohibit the proper representation of the people and duties as an individual board member. Not communicating items or details brought up at board meetings to administrators or other board members in advance. We say no, that was not noted as a violation. Any board member may add agenda items or say comments during the meeting that are not brought up in advance. Now, is it professional courtesy? Yes, absolutely. It's good if they want to, ahead of time, discuss topics with the superintendent. But these are the leaders of the district. They are in a role of the board of directors, essentially. They are governance. They are the boss of the superintendent, and the superintendent is the boss of the administration. And so it is their purview and their right, and really in many cases their duty, to bring things up. They might think of something just at the last minute and want to ask a question, or there's something comes up, and of course you can't have extensive debate on something that's not on your agenda, but it is well within your rights to bring something up and ask the questions and as it occurs during a meeting, and you're not required to do that in advance. Allowing an attorney to sign a legal agreement allowing release of attorney-client privileged information on behalf of the board. In other words, the common interest agreement. And we said that yes, this was a previous, maybe previous, but it was one of the previous boards. This should have been a vote to delegate that authority by the full board after thorough discussion with any conflicted board members recused. And I do know there's, more to this story as far as why it was done this way, in a perception of protecting the district, or maybe even valid facts in protecting the district, possibly from a lawsuit or other issues. But at the same time, if an attorney is going to sign something, that needs to be delegated from the board, that authority. Negotiating superintendent contract terms without delegation and consent from the board. And again, yes, this should have been a vote to delegate that authority to the full board. And then acting alone without board approval, other than, of course, as described above and in the findings, we, generally speaking, board members may do things alone or with one other member of the board. They can gather information, they can do site visits, ask questions, express concerns, communicate with the public, state their opinions and recommendations, draft policies. Amazingly enough, there's actually someone in the education space that doesn't quite understand that board members as legislators can draft policies. It's kind of shocking to me. But yeah, definitely, that's one of your roles, is drafting things, providing things, ideas, attending events, and being very active so that you are not just rubber stamping. So, all right. That is a long explanation of the Q&A on board member roles and duties, and we did note a general misunderstanding. And so hopefully this report is helpful. I mean, there have been past reports of board members, with coercion and bullying, and like I said, those things do need to be determined. And then more recent concerns with how people are treated, is there scolding or apathy or avoidance, or, what is happening. So a lot of personality issues can happen as well with elected officials. We all know that. And none of us are perfect, right? We say, again, purchasing and finance are very conscientious about their work. I think I mentioned that already. And we have a whole section on superintendent contract changes. And I'm going to skip through here and go down to the findings. There's another section here on the investigators and the reports. And I understand that some of those reports may possibly have been released to the public. So we do touch on that a little bit here. And then we touch on the request for reimbursement of legal fees, which is relates to the PED's statutory power to suspend the board, or in other words, the Board of Finance. But there's gross misunderstanding that they removed board members. They did not remove board members, but they did suspend them, suspend the board and the Board of Finance. And so there were questions about, well, why weren't those particular board members seats on the ballot, and that was because they were still board members by law. They couldn't be removed without due process. And so we do add a little bit for clarity here, some of the processes and ways that the district or any government can have due process when there may be malfeasance or misfeasance. And usually that's upon conviction. There's a section on the allegations of coercion, bribery, and quid pro quo. And again, this is an area that was not within our scope of work. And this is an area that still we are recommending oversight agencies definitely continue to take a look at for accountability, and things need to be concluded upon because a lot of it is the root cause issue. We talk about the common interest agreement as well, allegations of wasteful spending. There were concerns about speaker fees, so we're recommending that the board maybe look at a policy of how much can be validly spent on that. Strategic planning consultant as well. There were concerns about wasteful spending. The district paid approximately $69,000 of the $120,000 contract for strategic planning. May have received a draft of the deliverable, but not the deliverable, so there's some questions there. Something to keep an eye on. Allegations of related party transactions. This isn't something that we found. The former president did in an open meeting disclose her relationship with the vendor that was under discussion for the student tools, and we did not see a violation there. The anonymous survey, we touch on that. And then we do have an expanded part of the engagement was time and leave testing. And so looking at timesheets and leave, this is a very common area of abuse of taxpayer dollars. And so we did see, let's see, the former director of athletics. We did see some data, sports data analytics, for where he had been refereeing at games, and then there was not district leave on the books. And then there were complaints as well, I think I skipped one here, about the former deputy superintendent of HR, athletics, transportation, and safety and security. And that related mainly to the use of FMLA, and then having another role and not always charging leave in the district records. So we do detail those out. And then a former superintendent, there were complaints that he was conducting personal activities during work hours during his time here in the district. And some of the activities we noted were teaching university classes and mentoring meetings, professional travel, things like that. But we didn't identify any specific with the former superintendent, any specific leave or time fraud. It was very hard to pin down, and some of the records were not available to us. Okay, so this gives more details on each position and the numbers of days that we looked at. There were quite a few, for the first position here, quite a few days absent from the district, but then still paid. And we have recommended that the district take a look at their leave policies. And I know this is an administrator, but definitely in the classroom side, every single day that a teacher is not in a classroom, it impacts directly the students' learning. We did have a report that a golf cart was discovered at another district, and so we did take a look at the disposals And the paperwork was there, so it was hard for us to tell that that was anything inappropriate, and we did not have a finding on that. And then we also were made aware of PED licensure issue, which I mentioned before. We were able to corroborate this concern by reviewing the professional development plans, discussing the lack of licensure, and that was the one where the $64,500 was overpaid to the employee. And then we have a section here on, as I mentioned in the TOC, the table of contents, the corrective actions to date. And they have cured several things. And we have our conclusion here and our exit conference, which we don't need to look at. And then I'm going to give you the list here, the bird's eye view of the findings. So the first finding was on legal services, purchases, time and leave, OMA, internal audit function, PED licensure, policy recommendations, administrator evaluations, electronic signatures, opportunity to strengthen the audit and finance committees. And I do want to say the district does have and utilize the audit and finance committees and does pretty well. There's just some additional opportunities there, I think, for oversight in their statutory duty. And then the last one is that the district hadn't reported some of those allegations related to bribery and coercion and so on to the state auditor's office under the 1266 requirement of the state statute and the audit rule to the state auditor's office. And so just to keep in mind, anytime there's a violation in connection with financial affairs or possible violation that becomes apparent to the district, then the state auditor's office has to be notified immediately is the word that's used. So you find out about anything that is apparently there, you have to report to them and then follow up. A lot of places don't know that, and a lot of attorneys don't know that. So on legal services, we've talked a lot about this already, but this kind of goes over some of the actual violations, such as backdating of the contract, executing new project legal services without an approved professional services agreement or valid purchase order. And this is something that was in the external audit of that year as well. Purchase approval outside of procurement, and the CPO is by statute supposed to be, the central purchasing office. The CPO is the person who needs to sign off on the purchase orders and approve the procurements. Okay, we'll go to the next finding. District did not follow internal procedures for small purchases. And this relates to that procedure manual that I was telling you about, that the district did not follow internal procedure for small purchases. This isn't a state law violation, but rather procedure. And so there were some exceptions there. 24 purchases between 40,000 and 60,000 didn't have required board approval. They didn't come to the board for approval. And 2 purchases over 60 didn't have the board approval. And then purchases in excess of $7,500 didn't always have quotes, price quotes. And I believe the district is going to, if not already, change that procedure. Probably be a board discussion on what thresholds and levels you all determine is appropriate to come to you. So. And of course, it does go through the finance committee as well. Now this one relates to time and leave. Oops, that's okay. And again, just a little more details on here and giving the dollar amounts. The impact of the first employee was being overpaid, just from what we saw, $11,365.82. And that's not an absolute number, that's just what we saw in our testing. The second employee, the impact of it was $5,854.08. If those days were missed. And then for the third employee, this is the one where there was a lot of, quote unquote, working from home or out of the office, and very difficult to pinpoint how much time may have been lost to the district. Okay, Open Meetings Act compliance, I think I covered this already. The district cured that mistake, and then the only other OMA violation we noted was that one board member could not be heard during one of the meetings. Let me look at the date here, June 18th, 2024. This next one is the internal audit function not being established. And this is a good finding to read. They really do have a significant impact on governmental entities. They help identify, and those that do have internal auditors, any fraud, waste, or abuse dollar amounts are significantly less, and things are handled much more timely and appropriately. And as I said before, they definitely more than pay for themselves. PED licensure requirements, I think we've gone over this one already, and the loss to the district of $64,500. Policy recommendations, there's a long list here, and so we'll just leave that for the board's consideration and the audit committee and finance committee and administration as well to weigh in on. And even the public, once these things make it to the board for consideration and on the agenda, the public can weigh in as well on what they would like to see the board doing with policy. It came to our attention that the evaluations for administrators were not always being performed under previous superintendents. This has been corrected by the current superintendent. So as everyone knows, just for whether the feedback is positive or negative, it's important to have consistent accountability and feedback going to employees. Electronic and stamped signatures. Now, this is something that has recently become a very high risk, and so we have been adding it. Again, remember our duty and our ways to even, provide good accounting practices, recommendations in the findings, and so this is one of those. There have been so many instances of, people just using phishing attempts or breaking and hacking into systems like Banner, like other, what is the campus one? Anyways, there's been multiple hackers getting into systems. And so if bank accounts are changed or contact information is changed, all of that can be really, really difficult, and losses have occurred. I think it was Valencia County, right? Just recently had one. Yeah, so that was very scary. So electronic and stamped signatures, it kind of relates to that in a way. If board members or anyone in the district is allowing their signature to be used on a check or on whatever document, they need to, it's like informed consent. They need to either be there signing or give permission for their signature to be used after looking at what in the world it is that they're signing, right? Because if they don't, then that essentially eliminates that check and balance, and everybody knows we have to have the check and balance. So, and this isn't just Los Lunas, this is, it's governments everywhere. And so we are recommending that there not be any auto pen type situations to where if somebody's allowing their signature to be used, they know what it's being used on, they approve it, and they give permission for it to be used on that document. A check is a legal tender. It's a legal document. So that's what this finding relates to. And we do understand the board does review the check run after the fact, but that's a separate in the chain of all those, requirements. It's a separate requirement, and it's after the fact where the board can ask questions on. But that finding relates to the actual allowing your signature to be used on something. So just like you wouldn't give your password to sign off on a purchase order or something, the people who are signing checks should be the ones giving that permission from a check run or something saying, yes, go ahead and sign. Okay, so the Finance and Audit Committees, these are legislatively intended to be very strong monitoring and oversight forces for the district. They are independent. The superintendent and the CFO are ex officio members of the audit committee. So it's really, normally the chair is a board member, like it is in this case. You guys have the chairs of the finance committee and the audit committee being board members. And we see there's in statute that there's the requirement of making policy recommendations to the board. So your committees should be coming, I recommend a standing agenda, just meeting and then reporting to the board with any recommendations on policy recommendations to the board. And so, but it's not really limited to that. They could become a lot more active in not just meeting with the auditors through the audit process, but they can do spot check audits. They can ask for information. They can do a lot of different things to be an oversight force in the district as an additional check and balance. And the one parent and one community member with financial oversight does serve on the audit committee as well. And of course, they have the requirement to maintain confidentiality, so there are things that they can't speak about, but they are there because, again, they're closest to the people, and they need to be there for the proper oversight of governance. And we just add in here the audit committee's duties per statute and then the finance committee. And like I said earlier, the districts here, their committees are pretty strong. They are pretty strong. And the last finding is the 1266 letter that needs to go to the state auditor. So again, anytime that there is something that you become aware of, if it looks apparently like a violation of criminal statute in connection with financial affairs, fraud, waste, abuse, that kind of thing, the district does need to notify the state auditor's office right away. God bless you. And the district did notify NMDOJ and the FBI of certain matters, but didn't know to notify OSA, but then didn't even after we advised them to do so. But now the notification has been provided as of the issuance of this report. Okay. So that was Exhibit 1 with the findings, and the last part of the report here is just on the anonymous employee survey analysis, and it goes through some graphs here, and the results were pretty good, actually. Are you aware of any related party conflict of interest transactions? The response was pretty low. Scroll, maybe let's see here. The total responses were 630. And so we summarize the survey responses here. Most people, of course, were not aware of any procurement or purchasing violations. And like I said, we didn't note anything other than what we've reported already. And this one was, have you directly observed board members, the board or their members, its members, overstepping or failed to fulfill, understep their roles and responsibilities? The same for administration. And that is a little bit higher on the yes. So I'd say if there was I guess the bottom line on that is that there's more concern about administration overstepping and understepping than there is of the board overstepping or understepping. Are you aware of any time or leave fraud risks or concerns? And there's a small percentage that said yes. And then we had open-ended questions where people could give feedback, you know, in relation to culture or things that would be changed. Okay. I think I can control, go back to the first page if you don't mind. I know it's a lot of information, but we had to get through it. So it's good reading material. And Mr. Chair, Auditor Maestas and I can stand for any questions or comments.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start on my left. Ms. Sanders.
Oh my goodness, I have something in my mouth.
Travis is not, had to step away.
Oh,
Susan's out.
I'm sorry, what?
The superintendent stepped out.
Oh, okay. Well, do you all have any comments or questions?
Yeah, we do.
oh yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
I'll start on my left and move to the right.
Okay, so, we won't play around. I'm the investigator I'm investigator one. Thank you for giving me one. I'm going to ask you about the common interest agreement because I'm not sure that it really captured the essence of that particular agreement. And so I'm gonna, Mr. Beck, I'm so glad to actually put your name to your face. We had lots of correspondence 6 years ago, and similar concerns were brought to the OSA, to everybody and anybody that would actually had an email address that I could find. I want you all to know that this common interest agreement was not a search. It was a stumble upon. The investigation to begin with was not about board members and superintendents and any wrongdoing. What happened, and I'm going to tell you, is it was found in a legal bill. Started asking questions, asked Dr. Osowski to get that common interest agreement from the district's legal group. We finally got it. It's not signed, but it names 2 board members as threatening a former superintendent.
Former board members.
Former board members, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes. Former board members threatening a former superintendent. All sounds so damn familiar, excuse my language. And so I have some questions in regard to what you all can do to help us. Because you're right, in order for us to heal and move on, I think the truth has to be out there. I'm not gonna hide it. I don't care to hide it. So the question is, how can you assist us in getting this to law enforcement and having them do something with it? I know you don't have that authority. I know you're not a prosecutorial agency, and I know that. I understand that. But this common interest agreement was paid for by the district. So therefore, there's some issues, which is that finding, right?
Right.
So now, do you have the information that you all need to help us to go to other entities? Because what I would say is, I've been a superintendent in this district. I'm now a board member. I was one of the people doing this investigation and found this document. I have a lot of history, and no one has talked to me. Audrey called me, and she talked to me for about an hour. It wasn't within the scope of her work here. So, I have a box. It's got a lot of documents in it. I talked to lots of superintendents after me, similar experiences. And I think it's important that if we're gonna sit behind here, that we don't abuse our authority as the fiduciary responsibilities that we have. And I think that this really needs some help from a state agency. And so I'm begging you, as a current board member, to help us get to where we need to be with this particular piece. Taking my personal feelings out of it and looking at the evidence that's presented, right? Get it to somebody and off my plate. Go do your thing. I loved your statement. You said that we're entrusted with accountability and that it matters so much. And Mr. Beck, you said, not today, that you wanted to help this board and this district to do what you can as an office to help us with that. So I need to know, do you have all that you need?
I'm gonna have Sean respond to this since he's got more history on this than I do.
And Sean, you'll have to come to the mic so they can hear you online.
Otherwise, we'll have an OMA violation, Mr. Beck, and we don't want that again.
Violations, please.
Sean Beck, Special Investigations Director of the Office of the State Auditor. Mr. President, board members, to answer your question directly, do I have enough information right now to take action? I'm not prepared to answer that question without going back and looking at our files. However, when we get information that may point to a potential criminal act, the Office of the State Auditor, the State Auditor himself, is required by state statute to provide that information to the jurisdictional prosecuting authority. And that includes the appropriate law enforcement agencies that they can conduct their criminal investigation into those allegations. And then they take it where the evidence would lead them. And if they choose prosecution, that's their decision. It's not something we have the authority to do. We are a reporting and notification agency. So notifying them of these concerns and bringing everything we can to them is our statutory responsibility. So yes, that's something we definitely do. And in this particular case, on these issues, we do make referrals to those agencies that have either enforcement or regulatory oversight over the district. So those include the Public Education Department, the New Mexico Department of Justice, Attorney General's Office, the local district attorney's office, as well as State Ethics Commission, and other bodies of the like as appropriate. So I don't have a direct answer, but that's exactly what we do, and we do that in every case because that is our responsibility. I would, because you have discussed this and you have pointed to the fact that you have a lot of documentation, I am not prepared right now to tell you that I have everything that you have. So if I don't, what I would like to be able to do is to, one, meet with you to gather that information from you on behalf of the district so we can do our part. But I also want to remind the district that you also have your part to do as a governing official body. If you have this information, then it is also your responsibility to bring it to the attention of the appropriate authorities as well. The more voices that bring these issues up, the more attention it may be paid. So do not forget that, as well as you may also have other actions within your authority that you can take to help remedy some of the issues that you brought up that have been ongoing for a while. So I hope that answers your question, and I will stand available to answer your calls and take that information, and definitely will follow up on it. And I can assure the community of Los Angeles that will happen.
Okay, so I have others. So, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what that common interest agreement really talks about. It specifically names 2 board members, threatening that superintendent. And then, through the investigation and subsequent conversations, there was never a board meeting to approve that common interest agreement. And the entire board was not made aware of that common interest agreement. It was a unilateral decision made by the then board president. And the superintendent at the time, we could not get that former superintendent to talk to us in our investigation. I don't think that anybody can make any connections about what quid pro quo would have been going on unless they have that piece. And I'm not an attorney, but I would question the confidentiality of this particular document since it wasn't a board-approved authorizing the attorney in this case to sign off as representing the school district. Just want to make that statement. It was reported that, and in the findings that we report this to the OSA, is that adequate? What has been done thus far in terms of, what did you call it, 1266?
1266.
Okay, thank you.
To answer that specific question, there was, the district did finally comply with their statutory requirements to inform the state auditor's office of any potential or any violations, criminal statutes involving their financial affairs. So that initial notification has finally been made, which resulted in finding, because it was much delayed.
Yep.
Information was provided. I can't speak to the totality of that information at this point in time. But that information will be fully reviewed and we will follow up on it appropriately. If we need more information, we will definitely reach out to the district to get that. And so we can pursue our responsibilities with regard to that information and that notification. To your earlier point on the agreement itself not being approved by a board, by the full board, that is an internal issue I would definitely urge the board to discuss with your legal counsel, because there may be actions that the district and the board may need to take to follow up on that, because it sounds like, as you described, that there may have been a violation. That's one of the things that's covered in this special audit. So it's just a reoccurring thing, and I would encourage you to pursue those.
If I may interrupt, you know, in December of 2025, I wasn't the president back then, but the board voted on a resolution directing a contract attorney to speak to Paramio Accounting Group. That happened at a later time. I don't have those dates right with me, but it happened on 2 separate dates. Ms. Jaramillo and our contract attorney, we participated in a Zoom meeting with that attorney, requesting just those questions. Now, I didn't become aware of the common interest agreement until December, and so it turns out that there's 3 parties in this common interest agreement, and it's attorney 1, attorney 2, and well, 4 parties: the board of education and the superintendent. Now, attorney number 1 would be our attorney. Attorney number 2 would be the former superintendent's attorney. And like I say, there was 2 meetings, 2-hour meetings, and I mean, Ms. Jaramillo asked a lot of questions. We got some answers, but they weren't totally what we wanted on the first meeting. The second meeting, she just wouldn't discuss it too much anymore, and it was due to the fact that attorney number two, here again, we have an agreement that's not signed. Nobody can find the original agreement. It was paid for by the district, and they found it in the, after they paid $5,000 or some dollars to produce this agreement. And so we're kind of in a stuck position because attorney number two will not discuss it. The former superintendent, and it was a temporary superintendent. At that time, there was several that were going through, but won't discuss it. And so we're at a point now where it's going to be pretty tough for the district to, and expensive. I mean, we've spent a lot of money on legal fees to make that determination. So that's where we're at right now. It's you know, I don't know if we'll ever get, without spending a whole lot of taxpayer money, I don't know if we can get those answers.
Mr. President, I'd like
Yes.
to add in there for context that the events that promulgated the common interest agreement were in spring, early spring and late spring 2023. So as we're getting confused with boards and former boards and current boards and the superintendent that begat the other superintendent that didn't, whatever, those events were during that particular time period, and that's pretty important for this discussion.
With relationship to the agreement you're talking about, Mr.
Yes.
President, members of the boards, the State Auditor's Office is not in a position and will not provide you any type of advice on that. That is something that the board should discuss with your legal counsel on what your options are if you paid for services, and you can show you paid for services and didn't receive those, then you may have a cause to seek those answers or to some other just settlement, for lack of a better term. Because that is definitely a legal issue that we're not going to go on. To go back to the other board members' questions, as far as any type of violations of criminal statutes involving the district's financial affairs, that's where we have a means to ensure that those issues are looked at. But some of the other things you're discussing about the history of that agreement, what it entailed, who approved it, things like that, the actions of the board at the time. And now you are all recognized as representing the board and the district now. And so it may have been your predecessors. However, the buck does stop with you when it comes to this, and this is a snapshot in time when it's looked at.
Yeah.
So looking at those, making the corrective actions going forward to prevent these types of similar actions from reoccurring is what you're being charged with doing through the recommendations from this audit. Looking back and trying to correct some things that had occurred previously, there are other avenues that you can pursue aside where we don't have any means of stepping in and don't have any roles in stepping in and to provide you any type of guidance or advice on that.
Okay, well, we as a board will discuss that and we'll figure that out. Dana, do you have any other
Of course I do.
topics? Not the common interest agreement, any other topics?
No, I want to ask, I just want to make a statement regarding where those documents, all of the documents related to the two investigations are with two law enforcement agencies at this point. I want you to know that so that maybe they'll dig them out from under the pile because this has become an issue. And we know that you all have more political power than we do. Stating fact.
Well, if I may respond, Mr. President, members of the board, if law enforcement has those documentation, they have the responsibility to look at the information provided and make a determination if there's sufficient grounds to present a potential criminal case to the appropriate prosecutorial authority, If they have not done so, re-referring that information may respur that, we'll definitely do that because that's our role and our responsibility. But aside from there, once it becomes back in their hands, again, we're just a reporting and notification agency. It is up to them and ultimately the prosecution to determine whether or not there's a case to go forward against any individual.
Sure. And I understand that. We just haven't heard anything.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for clarifying what you do and helping us to maybe push this along. Just say, hey, look at it. Will you please give them an answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Seymour?
Absolutely. Ms. Adamio, I'll direct my comments and questions and concerns to you. The period under review is, and you mentioned this several times, July 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2025. I wanted made publicly aware that there were 3 changes of the board and control of the board during that time. So I also have a comment on page 2. One of the findings you had mentioned was a $64,500 in stipends overpaid to an employee who did not have a qualifying licensure. Was that for that 2-year period, or was that a longer period of time?
That was a longer period of time, right,
Okay,
Justin?
I just wanted that
Can
for
you,
the record.
since 2016.
Okay, so
Yes.
that was since 2016, so
Yes.
it just seems like a very large amount of money for a 2-year period. I was quite concerned, so I wanted it for public notice that that was for a longer period of time. It would have been nice to know for that period of time exactly how much the overpayment was for. A couple more comments. On page 20, the law conference participation. I believe you cite that this was where there was a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I did want to make public aware that these were all individual board members were brand new board members, so learning the roles of what you can and cannot do. And that 2 of the 3 board members are no longer seated board members. So that was kind of interesting as well. I wanted that brought out as a public statement.
Good, great points.
Yeah. On the page 23, we had the 4% exceptions, basically the 4 that would amounted to 4%. So 4% of $911,740 is $36,000. It is still a waste of taxpayer dollars, but when someone's reading this, I don't want them to think that $911,000 was wasted or unidentified, or it was basically board approved the procurement. So I was wanting to call that to attention. On page 29.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Seymour,
Yes.
where did you cite that at? Your last one?
The site was on page, Dr. Ozowski, it was on page 23.
Okay.
It's on the bottom of page 22 was where the dollar amount shows. But if you actually do 4% of the exceptions, 4% of that is the $36,000.
I see what you're doing. Thank you.
And again, on page 29, we talked about the sightings, basically board involvement in day-to-day operations. I again would comment that 2 of the board members, all new board members, 2 are no longer seated board members. So these are just things for the public to be aware of. On page 35, talks about members' roles, etc. Again, not 35, 34, number 17, the negotiating superintendent contract terms without delegation and consent from the board. Again, that was the prior superintendent, and prior board. That was not any of the most recent 2 seated boards.
That's correct. That all occurred in August 2023 through November 2020.
Which was, yeah.
2023.
again, outside scope, so I just kind of want to call attention to just a couple of these things. All right. On page 37, again. No seated members of this board were involved in the hiring or the contract negotiation with that prior seated superintendent, so I think there's already some systems in place.
Actually,
that have
Mrs. Simoia, I think Mr. Vickers was on that board.
Yeah, I was on the board at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vickers, for the clarification. Thank you for the scope, and we do appreciate the detail and the level of detail. I think that a lot of the oversight has been improved since the initial findings of that, and I think that you'll find this current board very active in making policy improvements and checks and balances within the system, so I think we're on our way. So thank you very much thank you for attending, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Chair, we do recognize that as well, and unfortunately, audits are always looking in the past, but there have been corrective actions and many changes, and changes in the right direction. And current superintendent, we have appreciated your willingness to hold the line and always be responsive to our requests, and we've worked really well together through this process, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vickers, I don't have anything. Dr. Osowski.
Is everybody rested up? Not really. Actually, this is a question for our state auditor, sir, and I asked this of Mr. Beck. So, as board members, we attend a lot of training, and it's at the taxpayer's expense, and we go there because, with very few exceptions, Mrs. Sanders is an exception to the rule, we are lay persons. And so we hit the ground running with these trainings. I have exemplary attendance certificates. I have never heard of a 1266. Not once. Not once. So you can imagine my surprise, because I do like holding the line. It's kind of documented in here. When and how are we going to improve that process? Because I can promise you, the first time I would have heard it, I enjoy Santa Fe, I would have enjoyed lunch, because I would have been happy to make some of these reports in person. How are we going to improve that process? No other board needs to go through this because they don't have proper training and information.
Let me talk about just training in general that our office provides. We audit every single public entity across the state of New Mexico, and it's very difficult for the general public to understand it. So what we've begun to do is to kind of combine findings by categories of public entities in our findings report. It's an annual report that we put out. And so for school districts, we separate out those findings. And then we also provide some tried and true corrective actions for these common findings. We can't provide direct assistance to specific public entities because it constitutes management participation. It's against our standards. Now, in terms of specific training, we have been invited every year to NMASBO conference, and we've been providing training there every year. In fact, Sean gave his Scared Straight presentation on fraud, waste, and abuse, including information on what is 1266, what constitutes apparent fraud, waste, and abuse. But I agree that there's not a lot of common knowledge about this statute, and we have an obligation, my office has an obligation to really inform people about this, and we take every opportunity to do so. So we intend to kind of expand our partnerships with other advocacy organizations, whether it's New Mexico counties, New Mexico Municipal League, and in your case, the school board officials. We haven't done much with the school board officials but we have with the business side, with NMASBO. And so it's a conundrum because, again, sometimes Sean or myself will open up the paper and there's a 1266, and I ask him, Sean, did you get a phone call? And he'll tell me no. So we have to call and remind them of this, and it's very serious because it has to be documented in the audit report, even if you do report it.
Correct.
And it's worse if you don't. So I share your concern. I wouldn't say it's common knowledge, but we are doing our level best through our opportunities to provide training to raise the awareness on what 1266 is and how it should be reported.
Well, just as a follow-on, I did attend the Scared Straight conference, not because I was required to be there. I just want that out there. It was on my own free will and volition that I went into that room, and I sat in the front. I'm sure you remember me. And in listening, I mean, the conference was fascinating, and I gained a lot of information from that conference. It doesn't count towards our annual required training hours. And it's an expensive conference for a district to send 5 school board members. You know, there are other districts that send their school board members, but it also doesn't count in our hours. So we come back to that, are we being frivolous with the taxpayers' funds? But that was where I learned something pretty critical 27 months into my first term. So just maybe a point of interest there. The next thing, we have not enjoyed fabulous, consistent, high-quality, ethical legal advice. We've had moments of high-quality, ethical legal advice, but it's very expensive whether it's high quality or not high quality. What can we do, A, for reporting purposes, because we again might have a few people that we need to meet to bring some awareness with less than what I would consider very ethical or quality advisement. And many times, not just with my particular situation, but I think many times we've had some advisement that's taken us down a rabbit hole and now we've got a problem. So what can we do there? What can we do different?
Well, again, I can't really give you specific advice, but what I can tell you just personally, based on my own experience and being a former mayor and having the privilege of my name being on the front sheet of a lawsuit, it always helps to have in-house counsel. And, you know, what helped me was to have specialized contract counsel for special issues, whether it's personnel issues or police practices. And then you all have insurance coverage, and sometimes you don't get to choose the lawyers that work for your insurance companies. They show up and that's your attorney. But you do have some discretion in terms of, you know, having a really good in-house counsel that is very good at determining specialized needs for the district through contract counsel. I know that's probably not going to help you very much, but I'm just giving you my
You're not
own.
getting a passing grade on that answer, but that's okay. That's all right. You're 1 for 2. Pretty good. Appreciate that.
She's keeping score.
That's okay. Thank you very much. You've responded. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're getting close to concluding here. As far as this report, you know, this report is dealing with the dates between July 1st, 2023 and May 1st, 2025. I too second Dr. Osowski's comments about the 1266. I served, I'm in my 12th year as a board member. My first term was in 2007, and I've been on the board on and off. The only part that would apply to me in this whole report would be the top paragraph on page 41, where there was issues with the board's removal in 2021. And so I personally, and I think the current board we have right now, we take this business seriously, and it's all about integrity, and and doing what's right and complying with the law and the statutes and being a productive leader in the district on the behalf of kids, students from K through 12. And so I just want to thank all of you. I know I've dealt with Mr. Beck in some past audits, and Audrey Jaramillo, I've known her for many years. She was a board member, she was a president of our board association, and she's also been an auditor for quite a while, and I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Maestas. You seem like a man of good intentions, so we thank you for presenting tonight. We speaking on behalf of the board, you know, we take all these recommendations seriously, and you know, I can speak on behalf of Superintendent Chavez and her staff, and Mrs. Jaramillo has already verified that we're already taking the actions to correct issues, and you know, I think we need to deal with some policies, and we intend to do that. And in conclusion, we thank you for your time, and we'll do our job. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move to item F on the agenda, and that's announcements of meetings.
Oh, you have to
We have
accept
to
the
Oh,
audit.
I'm sorry, we have to accept, sorry. Okay, I'd stand for a motion to accept
Mr. President,
the audit.
Mr. President,
Yes, Ms. Seymour.
I move to accept the special audit as presented by the JAG Jaramillo Accounting Group, Ms. Audrey Jaramillo and her staff.
We have a motion by Mrs. Seymour to accept the audit as prepared from the Jaramillo Accounting Group. Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a second by Dr. Osowski. Ms. Sanders, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Seymour, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Dr. Osowski, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The acceptance is approved by a vote of 5-0. Okay, now we'll move to item F. Announcements of meetings, June 4th to the 6th, 2026, New Mexico School Board Association School Law Conference, Embassy Suite, Hotel 1000, Woodward Place Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico. A quorum may be in attendance. This is for training purposes only. No decisions will be made. June 9th, 2026, Audit Committee by attendance by invitation only here at the conference room at 4 p.m. June 9th, Finance Committee here at the conference room at 4:30 p.m. June 9th, board meeting here at the boardroom at 5 p.m. Is that right?
June 23rd.
No, we have this. 5:30, okay.
Special meeting.
We have a board meeting, we have to vote on some bars, some budget adjustment requests that need to be resolved,
Thank you.
and that'll be at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you.
June 23rd, 2026, regular board meeting here at the boardroom at 5 p.m. And with that being said, I stand for adjournment.
So moved.
I have a motion by Ms. Sanders to adjourn, and we have a second.
Second.
We have a second by Dr. Osowski. Ms. Sanders, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Seymour, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dr. Osowski, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Meeting's adjourned.
Hey, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.